As families around the country are still filling in their census forms due in a couple of days, it's been revealed that the Australian Bureau of Statistics has embraced radical gender theory by changing the way it defines men and women. Without consulting biologists, the ABS has introduced guidelines which falsely claim a person's biological sex can change over time. Well, thankfully, Liberal Senator Claire Chandler is having none of it. She joins me now from Canberra to weigh in on this. Senator Chandler, this is quite extraordinary. Your colleague Michael Sukkar, he's the minister in charge of the census. Surely the Morrison government's going to wind this woke edict back or scrap it completely, surely?
Well, I certainly think that that's something that we have to be looking at, Peter. I mean, let's be very clear about it. Human beings can't change their biological sex over their lifetime. That's just fundamentally incorrect. And it's pretty disappointing to see the ABS pushing this as an idea, because we know that there is a genuine reason why we record that information, whether it's in the census or whether it's through other means. And that's so that we can know how to provide single-sex services where that they're relevant. So it might be finding out where you should be offering women's domestic violence shelters, figuring out where to offer services to men suffering from testicular cancer, this sort of thing. Having accurate data is really important, and I would have thought that the Australian Bureau of Statistics, our national statistical body, would have recognised that. Yeah, well, they're not a rogue entity. I mean, they report to a minister. That minister runs a portfolio. I spoke to Michael Sukkar on the show this week about the push for no religion by some activists, and then you find out a couple of days later there's this radical gender theory being thrown around the corridors of power in Canberra. I suspect Michael Sukkar didn't know about it. I know what his views on some of these things are. What's happening with the ABS that this sort of stuff happens and it's outside or unknown to government ministers? Well, as is always the case with us senators, when we want to know the answers to these questions, we thankfully have a forum to pursue those answers, and that is Senate estimates. And that's why I asked the ABS at the Senate estimates back in May who it consulted with when it was coming up with this crazy idea that biological sex can change during somebody's lifetime. And you would really hope that they would have consulted with biologists and scientists and maybe even the Federal Health Department to come up with this definition, but no, they predominantly went to bureaucrats and various lobby groups within the under the LGBTIQ plus banner. So I think it's very clear where these ideas have come from. It's the very same radical gender theorists that try and undermine what it means to be a woman and say that anyone who identifies as a woman is one. Yeah, well, we're all behind you. I think a lot of Australians back you in on this, but what are you going to do about it? I mean, is this something you're going to raise with the Prime Minister directly? Are you going to raise it in the party room? You're going to take on Michael Sukkar? How do we fix this? Oh, look, I think my colleagues are well aware of what my views are in relation to all of these issues, whether it's what the ABS is pushing, what is coming out from Sport Australia. And look, those conversations are ongoing, Peter. Well, more strength to your arm, because sometimes it feels, Claire Chandler, you're the only common sense person down there, but you're screaming into the wind and stuff is happening under government. I mean, this is a Conservative government in power. I'd expect this to happen under a Labor government. I am gobsmacked it's happening under a Conservative government. When I get out of this show tonight, I'll make a few phone calls myself. I want to pick up another story, because I know you're across this one as well. In Scotland, this is a real shock. The Scottish government, led by the SNP's Nicola Sturgeon, they've circulated a document to schools in Scotland that gives the green light for children as young as 4 to change their gender and name without the consent of their parents. This is an assault on children's rights. It's an assault on parents' rights, I have to say. Senator, what did you make of it when you heard about this? Well, I think fundamentally, Peter, the issue here is, like you say, that this is happening without the consent of parents. I think all parents have the right to know what their child is being taught at school and how their child is being supported at school. And this idea that children as young as 4 can be going to school and being confronted with this idea that, that they might be a gender other than their biological sex and that's happening without the consent of parents, fundamentally it sits very uncomfortably with me. It just feels like there is
It's just relentless, Claire Chandler. It just feels like the constant activist campaign, particularly in relation to young people, is just relentless.
It absolutely is, Peter. And look, I've spoken on your show many times before and your colleague shows at Sky News about all of these issues. And I do think that we have to look very closely at what our institutions, particularly our bureaucracies, but also universities, the media more broadly, are pushing to see where these crazy ideas are coming from. So I will certainly continue to keep pushing back against all of this because fundamentally I think it's important that we at least enable ourselves to have the conversation. And that is really what has concerned me about this whole debate right from the start, that these activists, not only are they pushing these mad ideas, but they're also trying to shut down anyone who speaks out against it. And that is really concerning for free speech in this country.
Spot on. I don't mind the debate, but I hate the debate being shut down. Well, lots of support for you here on Sky News. Thank you, Claire Chandler.
Thanks so much, Peter.